member. And tonight, in absence of Mr. Heaney, Mr. Neukins will be voting. Roll call.
Andrew Bacon.
Here.
Mark Neukins.
Here.
Roland Gambrell.
Here.
Jim Miller.
Here.
Eric Curtin. Here. Chris Souza.
Here.
Tom Silvera.
Here.
Second order of business is the minutes from the February 26th meeting.
Motion to adopt said minutes from February 26th.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And on to, Mr. Kane, I'm going to move on to the summary hearings.
I think we want to run through the rest of the agenda items and see if there
Do
are
that
any
first.
petitions to be continued, and then go
Okay.
on to your summary hearing.
We're adopting a different method for going through the agenda to keep everyone in the queue that they come in the line. So we're going to run through the agenda. I'm just going to read the petitioner, and then if anyone's here to represent them and continue, and we're going to continue as opposed to having a continuance calendar. So I'm going to skip those first two, right, Mr. King?
Yeah, those first two items have already been dealt with by the board, so
Okay.
you can remove those from the agenda.
Okay, so the first petition is a petition of Brian and Anna Donovan for a variance from section 603, 701. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of that?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, that petition had been before the board. There was testimony that started at the last meeting. However, they have now requested a continuance to the next regular meeting, which will be held on April 23rd.
Okay, so we're going to continue that. The next petition is Atlantic Beach Suites 2 by their attorney, David Martland, for a special use permit. We going to hear that one tonight, Mr. Martland?
Yes, that matter is ready for hearing.
Okay, so we're going to go with it. Second petition is the petition of Atlantic Beach Suites Hotel by their attorney, Sean Bouchard. That's the same.
Mr. Chairman, we can have a 1 month continuous for that.
So we're going to continue that to the April meeting.
Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the petition of On the Pond LLC in Diego's Middletown by their attorney, David Martland.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this matter has been pending before the board and has been continued from time to time while the board's been kind enough to allow us an opportunity to try to resolve issues with the city of Newport involving a property dispute. At this point, I would ask that those matters be withdrawn without prejudice while we continue to resolve those issues.
Motion to withdraw.
Oh,
Well,
there's
wait.
two of them.
Two, so it's the, okay, I see the two. Okay, so we need a vote to withdraw those two?
Yes.
Motion to withdraw without prejudice.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next petition is petition of On the Pond owners by their attorney, Sean M. Bouchard, for a special use permit.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so this is actually an adjacent parcel to the two that were just withdrawn. We are hoping to schedule a special meeting for the two petitions related to this parcel. I know we had requested that from the zoning officer. I'm not sure if the board is available to hold a special meeting for in early April. If that's possible, that would be what the applicant would seek to do.
Have you come up with a date, Mr. Kane?
I believe that the date of April 9th was probably the one that was the most compatible for everyone at this point.
That's a Tuesday, correct?
Tuesday the 9th, but you have to make sure you have a quorum.
Do we
And
have
if
a
I may
quorum?
suggest,
The second week of April?
It is, second week of April,
And we normally have zoning hearings
The fifth, the fourth.
the fourth week, right? Yeah, yeah, no, that's fine.
Everyone here?
I can make it. I can't make it.
We have a quorum. We'll-
all right, if I may suggest, you've got a few other items here that are going to need to be continued this evening. You could maybe give those folks an option to go to the April 9th meeting, and then that way the board's not assembling to hear the one case.
Will
I don't
do.
believe that your petition would take 3 hours to present.
No, I don't anticipate that.
Okay, Mr. Bouchard, we're going to continue to April 9th.
That would be
Do
great.
we have enough time to advertise that, Mr. Kane?
It's been properly advertised, and the continuance takes care of that. But it will be, there will be an agenda posted.
Okay, very good. Next petition is Esplanade Realty Trust by their attorneys Gerard A. Galvin. Mr. Galvin, are you here tonight?
Mr. Galvin sent a letter to the board's attention requesting a continuance of that matter to the next regular meeting, April 23rd.
Continue to April 23rd?
I believe that was the date.
That is the date.
He may have asked for May. Would you check, you should have a letter in your file from him, I believe
I've got a
he may have requested a different date.
Let me look it up. He's asking for a continuance to May 28th.
So 5/28,
Yep, 5/28.
and that's Esplanade Realty Trust.
That is. The next one is petition of Anastasia Patag for a variance from section 603-701 and 803G. Are you here this evening? I'm here. So you want to go forward tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put you on for a regular hearing. Next one is petition of SKN Associates LLC by their attorney Sean M. Bouchard for a variance from section 603-701 and 803G. You have two petitions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this matter is currently scheduled to be heard at the TRC. We do anticipate being prepared to go forward at the regularly scheduled April meeting.
April 23rd it is.
That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
And that's 15 Valley Road, correct?
That is correct. Next one is the appeal of Lori Abrams by her attorney Joseph F. Hook for an appeal of the issuance of a fence permit.
Joseph Hook for the appellant.
We're prepared to go forward tonight.
Okay, we'll put you on for a regular hearing.
Is that for tonight?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
It's going to be, we're going to go in order, so there's a large case in front, so I don't know how much time we're going to have, but we'll put you down for a full hearing. Right, Mr. Kane, is that accurate?
Yeah, it's up to the way the whole agenda flows. Like,
It's been flowing pretty nicely. The calendar calls, but I don't know how with it.
We'll know at our first recess.
I don't know what that means, so.
I'll know at our first recess where we are. Okay, the next petition of Leon Penteleos for a variance of section 725.
yeah,
Address?
Mr. Chairman, there are two petitions there. You have a special use permit and a variance for ground-mounted solar array on Aquidneck Avenue. Those have been referred to the Conservation Commission and Planning Board because a portion of it is in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District. So that would need to be continued to April 23rd.
Continued. The next petition is petition of Karen L. Archie Barbara. Address is 36 Walcott Avenue. Are you here this evening?
Yes.
Are you prepared to go forward tonight? Okay. And the last petition is a petition of V.L. Hogan Associates LLC by their attorney Robert M. Silva. Location is 65 West Main Road.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the agenda, I just suggested to my client that we continue the matter to the 23rd of April.
Okay, very good, Mr. Silva. Continue to the 23rd. Okay, now we're going to hear a summary hearing. Summary hearings are those hearings that have, what is it, Mr. Kane, less than 25%?
50%.
Less than 50% of a variance request. We read them in, and if somebody's here to object, we'll put it through a full hearing. If there's nobody here to object, we'll just pass it as a summary hearing. Mr. Curtin, can you read that one in?
Sure. The petition of Endeavor Holdings LLC for variance from section 603, 701, and 803G to allow the addition of the 256 square foot office space by enclosing the existing patio area with south side setback of 18.7 feet, where 35 feet is required. Said real estate is located at 100 Valley Road and further identified as Lot 19A on Tax Assessor's Plat 113.
Is there, is there anyone here that would like to speak against the petition? Seeing none, we're going to leave it for a summary. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve the application?
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Yeah, go ahead and read it in.
The petition of Atlantic Beach Suites 2 LLC by their attorney David Martland for a special use permit from section 602, articles 11 and 14 to permit a 23-unit hotel in the limited business zone and further identified as lots 4, 5, and 6 on Tax Assessor's Plat 116 Northwest.
Good evening. For the record, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, David Martland with the law offices of Silva, Thomas, Martland, and Offenberg, here on behalf of the owners and applicant, Atlantic Beach 2 Suites 2 LLC. The matter before the board this evening involves two special use permits for the property located at 42 to 44 and 56 Wave Avenue, which is identified as Assessor's Plat 116. Northwest, lots 4, 5, and 6. Currently, this property has a bar lounge known as Rusty's, and it has 5 residential units. There are 2 units above the bar/lounge, one a 3-bedroom unit, one a 2-bedroom unit, and then there are 3 1-bedroom cottages located on the property. My client has owned the property for some time, and they're looking to redevelop this property into a 20-unit hotel. A hotel requires the granting of a special use permit, essentially in any district where hotels are allowed. General business, limited business, office business. Hotels are allowed by special use permit. Additionally, this is located in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District, so any use that's either permitted by right or by special use permit requires the granting of a special use permit because it's in that Zone 1, as the board is well aware, and we've dealt with many of those petitions. There are essentially 3 types of uses in the zoning ordinance, and I think sometimes there's a misconception on behalf of some folks that uses permitted by special use permit are not permitted. And that's really sort of an incorrect interpretation of the zoning ordinance. There are 3 types of uses. There are those uses that are permitted by right, meaning you don't need to come to the board of review for any review. They're just simply permitted. You've got uses that are prohibited, meaning you don't have a right to those, and the only way to obtain such a right would be through a use variance. And then you've got uses that are conditionally permitted throughout the various zoning districts. And conditionally permitted uses are uses allowed by special use permit. And what that means is that the town council has made a policy decision that the use itself is permitted in the district. However, an applicant must come before the board for any particular piece of property and prove the requirements for a special use permit, the 5 criteria that are laid out in section 602. And the board's dealt with this on quite a number of occasions, but I think for a lot of folks, when they hear that zoning relief is being sought, you're not entitled, they think the applicant's not entitled to that, when in fact, that use is allowed, subject to proving the criteria. And, you know, and those criteria are as follows. 1, that the use will not result in a significant diminution of property values in the surrounding area of the district. 2, that not create a nuisance in the neighborhood. 3, that it will be compatible with the comprehensive plan. 4, that the granting of the special use permit will not be detrimental to, nor substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of property in the surrounding area or district. And finally, that the granting of the special use permit will not result in hazardous conditions or conditions that are inimical to the public health, safety, and welfare. So those are the 5 criteria, and it's the job of the applicant to come before this board and present evidence to establish that those criteria are met before you can grant a special use permit. So this evening, I have with me Lynn Small, who is a civil engineer who's testified many times before the board. She's going to be testifying concerning the site layout, the drainage plans, and utility plans, and how that's been all laid out, and how this proposal will not be detrimental at all to the environment, how that's protected, how it meets the stormwater requirements. So I'll have Lynn here to testify concerning those issues. Additionally, I have Paul Bannon, who's been before the board on a number of occasions. Paul, as the board knows, Mr. Bannon is an expert in the field of traffic. He'll be here to present testimony that there won't be any traffic hazards created as a result of this hotel. I've also got Spencer McComb, who is an architect who's designed the property, and he'll testify concerning his design and how it's in keeping with New England type of architecture. And finally, I've got Nate Godfrey, who is in the field of, he's a real estate appraiser, and he testifies as a real estate expert and on issues involving the comprehensive plan. So he'll be testifying in that capacity on why this project meets the criteria as laid out in the ordinance. As with any of these petitions, it goes through a very long process. We filed parallel petitions, one with the zoning board, or actually 2 petitions with the zoning board, one for the hotel use, the other for the special use permit. Those matters got referred to the planning board and to the Conservation Commission for review and recommendation. Additionally, we filed the development plan review application, which was also referred to the planning board for review, which in turn referred it to the technical review committee for the town, who spent a number of months scrubbing through that and making recommendation. Ultimately, through the process with the town's technical review committee and the third-party independent engineer, Craftsman Engineering, the technical review committee provided a positive recommendation and referred the matter to the planning board. The planning board, after hearing, granted a positive recommendation with respect to both the development plan review as well as the advisory opinion for the watershed protection district and the hotel. And the Conservation Commission also provided a positive recommendation associated with the watershed protection district special use permit. I've got copies of those decisions that I would like to enter into the record, if I may, Mr. Chair. The first is a letter dated January 29, 2019, from the Conservation Commission. It's case number 2018-01. If I may have this entry.
We're going to mark this Exhibit A.
One, two, three, four.
Just one.
The second is the development plan review notice of planning board recommendation, dated January 11, 2019. The pass that this be,
Exhibit B.
is Exhibit B, thank you. There we go. No, okay.
Thank you.
I also have the letter of notice planning board recommendation dated January 11, 2019. Mr. Souza has indicated that you have copies of these in your individual folders, so
We'll enter it.
one for the record, and ask that every mark is Exhibit C.
Yep.
One of those two. Yeah.
So that brings us to this evening, now that we've made it through that process with the positive recommendations from planning and the Conservation Commission. And so we're here this evening to continue the matter, to seek the two special use permits. At this time, I would like to call Lynn Small to the stand.
Lynn, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, 55 John Clough Road, Middletown.
Ms. Small, you've appeared before us in the capacity of an engineer, so we're going to recognize you as an expert tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Small, you're familiar with the petition before the board this evening, is that correct?
I am.
And can you explain to the board what you did to get yourself familiar with the particular property and the proposed plans that have been submitted by your office?
My office started with the base survey of existing conditions for the property. We did a property line survey and topographic survey with utility locations. We also delineated the nearest coastal feature, or subcontracted with a Rhode Island biologist to delineate the nearest coastal feature, located the edge of Wave Ave, and created the base drawing that you see as the existing conditions plan, which is sheet 3. in the packets that you have.
And so, on the existing conditions, could you sort of explain to the board how the site is currently configured, as well as its any significant topographic features or other environmental features?
Sure, the site is currently comprised of 2 different lots, or 3 different lots, I guess. On the lots at northern end of the property, we have 3 cottages, and then we have the Rusty's Bar and Grill that is situated at the southern end of the site. The parking lot associated with Rusty's is a compacted gravel parking lot. From the existing conditions, you can see that the edges of that parking lot actually go beyond the property lines to the rear. If you want, does this come off? Okay. The property line extends, that's this dashed line. It extends right now into the city of Newport's property. We also have a storage shed that's located on actually off the property into Newport, the city of Newport's property. At the same time, on the northern section of the property, we have 1 cottage that has its deck that extends beyond the property lines, and there is a paved area for parking and access for the 3 cottages. The site is currently serviced by sewer, water, electric, and gas. There are no existing provisions for stormwater. Everything that hits the site drains off and goes in different directions, to abutters, to Wave Ave, and then towards the moat that surrounds Easton Pond.
Are there any stormwater quality treatment measures?
The site currently has no stormwater quality treatment. There are grassed areas in between the cottages a little bit, but most of the site is basically impervious and compacted gravel, which is essentially impervious.
So all of the runoff that currently falls on this property just runs off to abutters unabated and untreated?
Correct. Other than what infiltrates into the grassed areas, correct.
Yeah, so if you want to just run through what the proposed site plan looks like.
So the site layout, basically, we're going to merge the 3 properties together, and then we've centrally located towards Wave Ave the proposed hotel, which is this dark dashed line. We're in a floodplain, so the building's going to be elevated, and then that allows us to put some parking underneath. We also have parking along the back, and we have the access drive, which will be entrance on the south end, runs through the property, and then exits at the north end, both onto Wave Ave. These entrance and exit aisles are a little bit wider than necessary for one-way traffic because it also meets the fire code requirements for width. The site has 23 hotel units and requires 27 parking spaces, which we do provide. We have loading areas and ADA accessibilities. The next sheet, which is sheet 5 in your packet, includes more of the stormwater design details. Basically, right now we're going to demolish everything that's on the site, and we're going to have our building, which will be impervious, but everything else is going to be pervious. We have pervious pavement, we have grass pavers, we have landscaping around the perimeter, pervious pavers in the front, and landscaping in the front. The roof leaders will drain down into the reservoir layer of the pervious pavement, and then the overflow will drain towards the moat. This drainage design results in a reduction in your peak runoff to everywhere, and a reduction in your volume to all of our abutting developed properties, including Wave Ave. One thing we have done with this design that we made sure all of our boards and the TRC were made aware of is that in this area, Wave Avenue has a curvature to it, but the property line is straight. In order to make it look aesthetically pleasing once this project is completed, we have our sidewalk following that curvature as well as our landscaping. Okay? We've also made sure that this sidewalk picks up from the end of the recently developed property to our north. So it'll be a uniform design. At the end, you'll end up with one nice product. There are a few utility poles that are under the existing conditions. Those all service interior buildings to our site. We're going to be removing that. The project will then be provided electricity from underground. We will be tying again into the municipal water system and the municipal sewer system and National Grid gas, once that's allowed. From a drainage and environmental perspective, this project results in a substantial improvement to the water quality that's coming off of this site. If we were to analyze the bacteria coming off this site from existing conditions to proposed conditions, the water quality treatment features that we have designed for this project now increase that treatment by over 400%. Okay? We also provide an increased treatment to phosphorus by over 150%. So the resulting conditions from an environmental perspective for this site substantially improved. As far as the utilities are concerned, we did get letters of availability for connections to the sewer system and to the water system.
So the city of Newport is aware of this project, the water department's aware of the project as well?
Yes, we sent them the site plans and a letter explaining the water demands for the project.
And they're in a butter, and they received notice of this hearing, and they haven't posed any objection relative to this project and its proximity to the project, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the runoff doesn't actually get captured into the watershed itself, does it?
No, everything goes towards the moat that goes around Easton's Pond, so it doesn't actually go into Easton's Pond.
But the moat abuts the pond.
It does abut the pond.
It does.
So we do provide
It goes
all of
into
that water
Easton's
quality
Bay.
treatment and
Goes into
everything.
Easton's Bay,
Right.
but the watershed protection district is specifically for drinking water purposes.
Correct.
So I want to make that point clear. It does go to Easton's Bay, you're absolutely correct, and that's why, in addition to getting permit from this board, if we're so lucky, we have to get permits from CRMC as well. And I neglected to mention that at the outset. Part of the development plan review process says you need to have your state permits before you submit for development plan review. Well, CRMC won't actually give you a permit until you have all your town permits. So what was done is we submitted for a preliminary determination application. Lynn, you submitted an application with CRMC for preliminary determination, is that correct?
We did. We submitted a preliminary determination application to CRMC prior to the start of all of the permitting for the project. It was required before the TRC would entertain the application. CRMC's comments was to maximize the pervious pavement on the site.
What measures are you going to take to protect the moat during the construction, during the demolition and the construction? Because it's an integral part of the dam system. What you know, do you have to do anything extraordinary to protect that, to keep, you know, building materials and runoff from going in there while you're building?
Yeah, as part of the demolition and construction phase of the project, like every project in the state, well, and Middletown, we'll have to submit a soil erosion sediment control plan to the town, It's also going to be reviewed as part of the CRMC application. Most of these features are represented on sheet 5 of your set. We basically have almost the entire site surrounded in a protective measure. Our plan shows a silt fence. This could be swapped equally as a wattle. That's the tube of straw. That's an acceptable practice.
And what's the purpose of that?
Basically what this does is make sure that during the construction process we don't have any erosive conditions that result in the transport of sediments to off-site properties. So we'll be protecting not only the moat, but also Wave Ave and our abutters.
Okay.
Now additionally, at the outset, you had indicated on the existing conditions plan that there were encroachments into that, onto the city property, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there were encroachments for the parking lot currently, as well as a deck, is that right?
That's
And
correct.
shed.
And a shed.
And a shed.
Now, all of those encroachments are going to be eliminated and removed, is that right?
That is true. This is
And that is going to be revegetated?
yes, revegetated not only with the grasses that exist today, but we're also going to enhance it with some trees and plantings. I actually have a landscape plan that I can hand to the board. The only change on this plan is that during the planning board portion of the project, we agreed to add trees to avoid a waiver regarding how many trees are required per parking space on the site. So if you'll accept these.
Yeah, I would accept it as Exhibit D. Thank you.
So as you can see from the plan that I handed out, what we don't have under the existing conditions is the area that's between the end of our gravel of our site and the moat is basically just some scrubby grass. Within our boundary lots, right now, we'll be pulling our parking area in because we have to provide 10 feet of separation from our property line, is under the town ordinance. So then all that area in between of our new parking lot and our actual property line will now be plantings and brush, which will add as additional protection for the moat, which you don't have today. We also have vegetation along the two boundary lot lines, and then we do have the street trees that are along the front property line. Hard to see. Oh, it's actually better to see over there. It's hard to see on my little plan, but it's easier to see on the plan that's up here, is that the boundary line for the site, like I said, goes straight across. We did get the trees so that they actually follow the line of the road. This was something that the planning board allowed, and Department of Public Works felt that that was acceptable. So that adds for a better streetscape than if we had kept it straight along our boundary line.
What kind of trees are those abutting the road?
Some Italian name. It's a 4-inch caliber deciduous tree, I can tell you that. Top one. I'm not familiar with the Italian name, to tell you the
That's-
truth. I know it has been reviewed by the tree commissioner, and he felt that it was acceptable.
And that was a waiver because the tree wasn't actually on the applicant's property, but was instead in the right-of-way area, correct?
Correct.
So we still, all the same number of trees that are required, the amount of landscaping that's required are all provided.
Correct. In that particular area right now, you have Rusty's parking. Like, that's where the cars are parking on the town property.
Can you maybe go to the map and show?
Sure. The limits of the gravel parking extend back here, around the boundary of the property, and right up to Wave Ave. So if anyone actually parks in front of Rusty's, there's about 5 feet of their car on the actual site. The rest of it is hanging out into the right-of-way of Wave Ave. So if you can picture that from the actual building that exists today, all of this will be landscaping now.
Lynn, what's the current footprint of Rusty's and the 3 buildings, and also the shed in comparison to what the hotel is going to be?
I would have to add that all up for you. I don't have that
So
total.
if you want to take the time to have it.
I can't, I have to just look at the drainage report where we add all the buildings up. Then areas on there.
Good.
525. The cottages are about 1,500 square feet. The storage container, the one that's on our site, is almost 200 square feet. The one that's on Newport, City of Newport property is 170 square feet. And Rusty's is about almost 2,600 square feet.
Cottages are 15 each or 15 total?
I'm sorry? The
15
cottages
each
are
or
about 1,500 total,
Total.
a little bit under.
And the current building footprint?
2,600, 25.
I mean, yeah, not the current, sorry, the proposed.
And the proposed footprint?
I don't have that number on here. So the building lot coverage for the site went down from 35% to 31%.
Allowed is 35%.
Oh, I'm sorry. And we're at 31%. So it's under the maximum lot coverage.
So right now, the buildings on these lots, 3,274 square feet, give or take,
What was the number you provided?
3,274 square feet.
26. I think it's more than that.
I got 44.7.
Yeah.
It should be like right around
It's gonna be-
4,500.
I got 44.7.
4564.
Well, it's just, that was the numbers they gave us, so, yeah, so that's close enough. 40.
Now, with respect to the drainage, just to quickly go through it, what is the water quality? What are the water quality treatment measures that are being utilized in your plan?
So the plan we have for water quality treatment is infiltration. We also,
And where does that occur?
infiltration for this site occurs everywhere south of this line. where the water table was deep enough, because we're lifting the grade a little bit. There's a change in grade across the site as you go south. We kind of flatten the grade out a little bit. So we lift the southern end up, bring the northern end a little bit down. By doing that, we're able to infiltrate the southern portion of the site in the pervious pavement.
Now, you can't infiltrate in the northern portion of the site because you don't have the appropriate separation between
I
the
sus-
water tables.
So personally, I suspect we do have the appropriate separation, but we could not get a test hole that supported that information because the material in this area of the site is all fill, and it's not easy to read where the water features are. If you're familiar with the property, you know that there's a retaining wall that runs between the Rusty's property and where the cottages are. So it's clear that that's a fill condition. I suspect that we would have been able to infiltrate the whole site, but we couldn't get any documentation to support that. So on a conservative measure, we lined the system at the northern end, but we do meet all of the requirements for infiltration and groundwater recharge.
And so
It's a pervious asphalt.
asphalt, and the water will go through the asphalt.
And then into a series of stones. And then there's a stone layer at the bottom that acts as a reservoir, which is basically just storage, lets things infiltrate. In that area, we do have some pipes to make sure that it doesn't overflow over the asphalt. Any excess overflows towards the back of the property.
What size storm can the system accommodate?
The system's designed for the 100-year storm.
Okay.
Where does the extra water be detained at?
So the stone layers provide some reservoir where you get some detention. Once that's filled, it will overflow at the back where we have the outlet for the system that discharges towards the moat. We've analyzed the 2-year, 10-year, 25-year, and 100-year storm, and there's a reduction in your peak runoff to all of the surrounding properties, including the moat around Easton's Pond.
And just generally speaking, the 1-year storm event has a little less than 3 inches of rain in a 24-hour period for the 1-year storm.
Correct.
And when you make your way up to the 100-year storm event, you're talking about 8 inches of rain in a 24-hour period.
Correct.
And so this is designed to be able to maintain the current and actually reduce the current rate of runoff for all of the storm events, 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, and 100, correct?
In all directions. We have our 2 abutters and then the city of Newport towards the rear.
Now, that doesn't mean that in a 100-year storm it's treated, correct? No systems.
Well, in the 100-year storm event, we meet the water quality requirement. We are always treating the water quality requirement, which is required regardless of which storm you have. That's your first flush. And then we're required to demonstrate to your TRC and engineering departments, as well as the state's engineering departments, that we result in a peak decrease, a decrease in the peak runoff from the site, even through your 100-year storm.
Now, what you've designed, as a result of this, is there going to be any impact, negative impact, to the watershed protection district or the water resources?
I believe that the project actually results in an improvement in the conditions in this area due to the drainage systems that we're designing on the site. We're providing water quality treatment where there is none right now. If you have any issues in your Rusty's parking lot, it drains right off the site right now. The system we have has filter stones. It has a maintenance schedule that will be enforced. We have vegetated buffer around the site, which you have none right now, which will add additional protection to the surrounding properties and Easton's Ponds moat.
Now, you mentioned maintenance. What type of maintenance is required in connection with a drainage facility such as this?
So pervious pavement requires that you do vacuum cleaning. It's usually about quarterly throughout the year. I believe Middletown is now asking that those reports be submitted to Jack's office as well as the town engineer's office once that they're done, to ensure that they're completed properly.
Now, in fact, one of the recommended conditions of approval from the planning board was that the property owner shall provide to the town engineer and the building official twice annual inspection reports on the maintenance and condition of the stormwater management system.
Correct.
And we don't have any issues relative to that, correct?
No, I believe that was acceptable.
Now, Lynn, you're familiar with Section 153 of the Middletown Code, are you not?
Yes.
And Section 153 provides requirements for maintenance of stormwater plans, is that right?
Yes.
And it requires the applicant to enter into an agreement, to have that agreement recorded in the land records, and details what is required for those reports, and provides for a schedule of those reports. Is that right?
Yes.
I've got for the board copies of that section of the code book indicating what is required. I know that the board is inquired relative to some of these matters.
We're going to mark that Exhibit E.
And you've provided a maintenance plan in connection with the submission of this application, which complies with the requirements of Section 153.
Correct.
That plan was reviewed by the Technical Review Committee,
Yes.
and it was reviewed by Crossman Engineering, who was hired by the town,
Yes.
and both the Technical Review Committee and Crossman found it to be appropriate.
Correct.
From an engineering perspective, are there any conditions associated with what has been proposed here that would pose a danger to the public?
No. From an engineering perspective, all your utility designs are compliant with best engineering practices. The drainage system is safe. The parking layout is safe, egress. The curb cuts are in areas where you have good lines of sight. So no, from an engineering perspective, the project doesn't pose any public threats or danger.
And with the requirement for these annual or twice annual maintenance reports for the drainage system, there will be ongoing review of the stormwater system and any deficiencies that might occur that don't actually presently exist, right? There is no mechanism currently to review the drainage and correct any deficiencies associated with the existing site.
Correct.
And in the future, there'll actually be oversight of the stormwater management system, so that if there are any deficiencies, those can be addressed and corrected.
That's correct.
And the town will have a right to access the property and inspect it themselves as well as receive those reports.
That's correct.
This proposal won't create a nuisance for any of the abutting neighbors as a result of water, increased water flow into their properties, right?
No, as I explained that the project results in a decrease in your runoff to all our abutters, including Wave Ave and the city of Newport. Additionally, we have screening around all of the property lines, which we don't have now, so that provides an additional screening buffer to any of our abutters.
I have no further questions for Ms. Small. If the board has any. If I could call Spencer McCombs.
Spencer, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony this evening will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address for the record.
Spencer McComb, 42 West Main Road, Middletown.
Mr. McCone, you've appeared before the board on numerous times, so we're going to accept you as an expert witness in your field.
Yes, sir.
Spencer, if you could sort of explain generally to the board what you did in connection with coming up with the vision for this hotel and how you designed it before the board this evening.
Sure. So looking at this hotel, like massing-wise, scale-wise, similar to other hotels that are in the area, what we did though is most of the hotels that are near it have mansard roofs that basically are attached to the outside of a flat roof building. In this case, and because the planning regulations allow for flat roofs, we instead decided to change that just slightly. We walked that through with the TRC, with the planning board, and our testimony is that if every building looks exactly the same in the mansard dormer world, it is it just looks the same all the way down the street. And some articulation and variance of that is actually a good thing architecturally. So what you can see here is a number of very similar size and scale massing buildings that are in Newport, Quinnick Island obviously. These are obviously New England style buildings. These are on the coast. These are in denser urban areas. And they all have flat roofs. And some of the things to note in these examples are there's a base of the building, there's a middle of the building, and then there's a heavy cornice on all of them. And so that's the design approach that we took in making this building feel like it fits in the area. It harkens back to definitely turn-of-the-century buildings. We also looked at, instead of what most FEMA-compliant buildings have, is just concrete piers that sit underneath the building. That doesn't really connect with any of the things in the planning board guidelines. And so in this one, we decided to make brick arches between them to make still FEMA compliant, but have a little aesthetic benefit to it. You can still see through it, but it just makes for a nicer looking building.
And we are indicating that the design is being compliant. That's because there's a flood zone located down in this area of Quinnick and Wave Avenue. Is that correct?
That's right.
And essentially, that requires the lifting of the habitable space. Is that right?
That's right. The first floor cannot have habitable space, especially bedrooms. And so the entire first floor is FEMA compliant in that way with breakaway walls where there are some walls. Obviously, you have to get into the building. You have to get up the stairs, elevators, stairways. So those things are on the first floor. But after that, everything is lifted above the FEMA plan.
In fact, if I refer you to the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan, on page 26 of that plan, in the second paragraph, could you just read this second paragraph in full?
It is also likely that the location of the district within the floodplain has an impact on the land use. New construction must abide by the development restrictions that require a first occupied floor of new structures to be above the 100-year floodplain elevation. Much of the district is at an elevation of 10 feet above the sea level, which the floodplain elevations ranging from 13 to 19 above the sea level. This compels construction to be raised above the street level, limiting the potential for street-level retail construction in much of the district. New retail uses in the district would have to be located on the northern or eastern areas outside the floodplain or where the ground elevation is close enough to the floodplain elevation to permit storefront access relatively close to grade.
And so to be FEMA compliant, having those retail uses in the floodplain would not comport, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And so this building's being lifted, and as referenced in the Atlantic Beach Master Plan, these properties located in this area would be inappropriate for retail uses, correct?
That's right.
Dave, is the floodplain different in the new building? You know, so the one that just went up with the retail on the first floor and the residential above it, and then like 2 doors down?
Yeah, so the elevation's a little bit higher there, and so there was a lot of time spent with the building official and FEMA, or with the building official on those guidelines for what could be put in there.
I was the architect for that project as well, and it's in a different flood zone. Although it's the neighboring property, the flood changes right there. It's
So the FEMA didn't have the same requirements for that building as this building? Is that
different because it's higher. The lower floor, which is referenced in what I just read, that eastern and northern parcels may be able to accept retail. And in that case, we were able to. Those units actually are flood proof, so everything in there is basically made so that water could rise and come back out of both those retail establishments.
Utilities on the second floor there, are they up in the ceiling? Utilities, heating systems, all that stuff?
I'm sorry, I
The
had a hard
heating
time.
systems in that other building are all on the second floor?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, sleeping is above, in that building, exactly.
So if you could continue on, I'm sorry to take you off on that tangent regarding
Sure.
rate.
just one? Can I have one follow-up question? So you cannot put retail then on the first floor? Or it's
We can't,
absolutely cannot.
absolutely not. It's in a FEMA flood zone.
Confusion, because the first floor here is the second floor. It's a 3-story structure with parking underneath. You're calling the first floor the floodplain, but that's not accurate. The first floor of what the use is the second floor.
That's right.
So your
True.
statement is a little bit misleading and technically inaccurate. It is suitable for retail, just not on the floodplain. And it's not suitable for a hotel on the floodplain either.
Would it be suitable for productive retail?
No. What he's
Well,
saying.
that's a different argument.
Well, I'm going to take exception saying I'm being cute with the language. Let me read that back to you. This says it's not suitable for street level access, right? We're talking about that first floor,
Correct.
that you can
And
access from the street level.
I agree with that, but
Okay.
that's not the definition of
But
retail.
that's what we read.
How many stories would you call that hotel? How many level stories would you
I
call
call it 4,
4.
yeah.
On the first
Yeah.
floor,
If you walk in, there is an elevator in that central area. I call it a 4-story hotel. If you would give us an extra story, by starting on the raised
First.
story, I'd be happy.
or what? In this 4-story hotel, on the first floor, what will you be doing there? Parking your car?
That's right. We're referring to it that way because that's what people think
Well,
when they
that
say
was what
first
my
floor, it's
colleague
where you
was trying
walk
to
in.
say. The
In our
first
case,
floor
yeah, we've
is
labeled
really
it ground
what
floor and then first, second, third for the upper level. So it's duly noted, but in conversation, the first floor is that open level parking. Okay, so here's a few more examples. So the design criteria, you can see here the arches that I was speaking of. Brick is part of or one of the natural materials that is allowed and actually recommended for this district. So there's a base of brick. There are some accent areas where it accents the vertical circulation that actually bumps out for the articulation, which is also required or asked for under the planning guidelines. There are clapboards and some shingle work actually on the upper level there, with a heavy cornice, which you saw from those previous examples, is what grounds the building. It's what screens some mechanicals that are behind. A lot of the techniques that have been used around town are to put a mansard and then to put a fence-type structure on top of that, which hides the mechanicals. In this design, we're using the heavy cornice line, which is part of the architectural heritage design of the building, to hide mechanicals that would then sit behind it. What that means is that the building drains through internal drains on that upper level there. That upper level is not a deck. It's not accessible for use. There's no access up there besides a scuttle for maintenance. So it's not something where people are going to be up there at any level. But it does screen from any point of view that you could take any small mechanicals that would be on the rooftop.
Now, what type of mechanicals are you proposing would be located on the rooftop?
There would be a condensers for the different rooms, and there would be probably a small chiller plant that would actually be up there as well. Not a plant, but a chiller mechanical unit that would sit on the roof as well.
And can you explain the size of those condensers for the different rooms?
Sure. Typically, they would be like a large suitcase. It would be a mini-split system that we would be using here, and yeah, basically a large suitcase. You probably are familiar with them. That gives each room, obviously, individual use, individual controls, specifically for that room. So.
And that size of the condenser, they're all separate for the rooms.
That's right. So that they need to
easily be screened and fit behind that cornice.
Absolutely. Yeah, the cornice here is about 3.5 feet, and so those are much smaller than that. And if you can take into account the angle that you'd be seeing these, it would very well cover any mechanicals that would sit back there, including the elevator overrun, which is also factored into the design.
Now, because you put those individual condensers on the roof, you don't have to have any of those through-wall units that you see in a lot of hotels, correct?
Yeah, P-TECH units, they're called. We're probably all familiar with them, that sit underneath a window in a hotel, but on the outside, it's quite a large grill that sits there. Again, doing away with that to be in keeping with the New England look, the scale and massing of the building, to not have these large grills for each room. All that happens in small mini splits on the roof.
And so, this is in keeping with the commercial design criteria set forth in the planning board regulations?
Absolutely. We looked at those before we even started designing this building so that they would fully comply. And I've been an architect in this area for 20 years, and used all those techniques that we use to break down a mass of a building, add natural materials, and have a New England feel to it.
I don't have any further questions for Mr. McClung. The board has any.
Any questions? I think we're good, Mr. Martland.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Paul Bannon, if I may.
Just raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony tonight will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N, 53rd Street, Barrington, Rhode Island.
Mr. Bannon, you've appeared before us on numerous occasions, so we will accept you as an expert this evening.
Thank you.
If I may approach, I've got a memo that Mr. Bannon had prepared and was submitted in connection with the development plan review process and with the zoning file.
We're going to
It's a
mark.
file.
We're going to mark it Exhibit F.
Now, Mr. Bannon, how long have you been reviewing traffic matters and as an expert in the field of traffic in the state of Rhode Island?
For over 35 years.
And have you had the opportunity to review hotel proposals in that time?
Dozens, yes.
And when you do that, can you sort of explain to the board how you go about reviewing a proposal and what you take into account in determining whether or not there'll be a negative impact on the roadways and the surrounding area?
In order to complete our studies, we first meet with the site engineer, work with them to ensure site access, circulation, driveway locations, to ensure that safe access and egress can be provided to the property. Then we do a review of the project area to determine existing land uses, roadway geometry, physical conditions, whether horizontal geometry or curves that restrict site distances, whether there's sidewalks, lighting, all those matters relative to safety. Then we obtain accident information from the local police department to determine if there are any safety issues that need to be addressed or would be exacerbated as part of the development that would require mitigation. And then we estimate the number of trips associated with the type of land use, and then we assess the future conditions.
Now, during that time, have you ever come across a proposal in which you thought, from your professional opinion, certain mitigation measures needed to take place in order for there to be safe access?
Absolutely, that's my responsibility.
And if the client refuses to undertake those mitigation measures, what is your response?
I'm not part of the project.
And in fact, I asked you to look at a project in which the road width was less than what you deemed appropriate, and you indicated you would not be part of that project unless the road was put up to appropriate standards.
Correct.
And so you've got a set of guidelines that you live by, professional standards that you take into account when you review these projects.
Yes, much of my experience involves work with the Department of Transportation in local communities. I was the engineer for the State Traffic Commission for over 6 years, doing studies just like this, safety analysis, operational analysis, and making recommendations to the State Traffic Commission for improvements if they were warranted, and then working on DOT projects, reconstructions, webinars, signalization projects. So
I come at it from a public standpoint, and public health, safety, and welfare is the primary focus of what I do.
Now, with respect to this site and this proposal, can you indicate to the board what you did to get yourself familiar with the proposal and the property?
I've done a number of projects along Aquidneck Ave over the last decade and very familiar with the project area. What we did is we did an inventory of the infrastructure and then did review of traffic count information, review of accident information, and assessed what's going on there and what should be done to improve the current situation.
And if you could explain your findings of the current situation out there and what will happen under proposed conditions to the board.
I'm sure you're all familiar with the area. It's a beach area, a lot of pedestrian activity. Looking at the crosswalks, the signage, and the crossings, they're presently deficient and in need of an upgrade. So we've made recommendations for that. Specifically for this site, the existing frontage, as Lynn had pointed out, is wide open asphalt and cars are actually parking on it. So if you wanted to go from Aquidneck Ave to Memorial along our property frontage, you'd be walking in the street or behind cars. The proposal provides an opportunity since the recent construction of the adjacent mixed-use building. They extended the sidewalk down to our property line from Aquidneck. What this project allows is extension of that further to the south to the adjacent property, which presently has a sidewalk. So there will be a continuous sidewalk so people don't have to walk in the street like they do today behind cars. And in that area, it's a very busy pedestrian environment. People walking across back and forth Aquidneck Ave, and that some of that was seen as a relative cause of some of the crashes that did occur because people were stopping for pedestrians that happened to take a step out into the crosswalk. One car yields and then they get rear-ended by another one because of the visibility of the crosswalk is limited that is there.
Are there any improvements taking place to upgrade those situations?
Not that I am aware of.
With respect to our property, we're putting in the sidewalk as you indicated.
Yes, that's a major enhancement.
And now there'll be two controlled access points, correct?
Correct.
As opposed to...
Uncontrolled backing into the street.
So we've got the entrance at the southern end and an exit at the northern end.
Correct.
And the sight lines, do they pose any issues or hazards?
No, the substantial sight distances in either direction to see coming traffic. Wave Ave services relatively low volumes because it services the few properties that are along its length. It's only approximately 800 feet long. It's primarily used as a cut through between for people to avoid the signal. And hopefully with what we're doing, it'll narrow the road, create a more visual environment that people won't be traveling at the speeds that they currently travel because if there aren't any cars in front of Rusty's, it looks like a wide open sea of asphalt. So we'll narrow it down, we'll put it in trees so it creates a visual condition of narrowness and need to slow.
Now, will the proposed hotel have a negative impact on the traffic conditions in the area?
No, this hotel use is a very low volume generator. It doesn't have any extra facilities, no restaurants, meeting space. It's just a place for people to stay. So this type of hotel use is a very low volume generator. Peak hour, less than 10 trips.
And when you say 10 trips, that would be?
Total entering and exiting. At any one time, there would be one car on the driveway.
And so entering and exiting into the site, there's no issue. The level of service at the intersections of Wade and Quidnick and Wade and Memorial, Purgatory, remain
Unchanged,
unchanged.
because of low volumes, yes.
Now, in connection with the study that you did, however, you didn't take any reduction for the uses currently on the site, correct?
Correct.
So you didn't back out any of the existing traffic going to Rusty's or the residential use.
No, I didn't.
So you left that in those locations at the intersection and then added
Yes,
Sister Trees.
yes,
So that is an extremely conservative approach to take.
yes. Yeah. The properties presently generate low hourly volumes, Rusty's more of an evening condition, and the homes, the apartments generate low volumes also.
So you may have a slightly more cars associated with the hotel in the morning, but a much lower number in the evening.
Yeah, you can see, 15, 20 cars parked at Rusty's that are in and out during, after 6 p.m.
So from your perspective, there are no conditions from a traffic perspective that would result in anything hazardous to the public, correct?
Correct, and we had, is just following up on the earlier discussion, recommendations in addition to the sidewalk, which we had done. We had recommended upgrading the stop sign up at Quidnick. It's an older sign. Reflectivity is poor. It's not, it's proper height and location. So we recommended to replace that. Recommended to put a crosswalk across that because it's kind of inexpansive because it's angled. So we wanted to delineate a pedestrian path there that hopefully again will slow traffic down, and put a yellow center line for maybe 50 feet down to delineate where cars should travel through there. With the new businesses up on the corner, there's more pedestrian activity. There's the bike shop. So people are getting familiar with those types of units, and we need to slow traffic down in that area. We've also recommended to redo the crosswalk across at Quidnick Ave between the surf shop and the restaurant. That's people going back and forth there regularly. So we'd like to enhance that crosswalk, put a new one in, and also put the proper warning signs, pedestrian warning signs that people are crossing there. So drivers can actually see that there's a point in the road instead of seeing taillights and realizing that they have to stop and why.
I don't have any further questions from Mr. Batten.
When you did your calculations, did you take into account the, I guess, approved hotel across the street from it?
Which,
so there's a vacant lot currently, in which there was another hotel that was approved. Across the street from
on
this
Wave Ave?
proposed.
A 13-room hotel on Wave Ave was approved for hotel use, which decision is currently been appealed, as I understand.
So did you take that into account, and how would that affect?
That would have no effect on this and what we're doing. That would generate less traffic associated with it. It's more about the pedestrian accommodations in that area relative, as opposed to volumes, because they're not high volume generators.
Right.
10 cars in an hour do nothing to 1,500 cars on Quidnick Ave in that hour. So it's more about the points of access to the property to ensure that they're controlled properly. And in this area, I think pedestrian accommodations are a key component of safety that would need to be addressed.
And when you undertook your review, the subway shop was operating.
Yes.
That's
On
now
that
closed. There may be something coming in the future, but.
Yes. Things.
And then you also look at, in your, when you undertake these studies, you look at future build volumes, right?
Yes, we usually project out when we have a larger type development.
And you project additional traffic into those,
Correct.
those volumes.
Correct.
To capture developments that may occur down the road. Right?
Yes.
And so when you did that, you looked at that in connection to level of service for those design plans.
Yes, and looking at, Quidnick, like this time of year, it's not that busy as opposed to July, August. And we looked at it in August and what was happening on a wave have access to a Quidnick. And that's why we've made the recommendations we've made.
So when you say you made recommendations in your report, are they formally filed with the state? Is it the state that has the determination on that?
The Department of Transportation would have the jurisdiction that we would have to put in what they call a physical alteration permit application to make those enhancements.
So you made those recommendations?
No.
Did anyone put that in yet?
We're not at that stage yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that is going to get done?
Correct.
Can you explain the assumptions you used to determine why the entrance is to the south and the exit is to the north? I'm just curious how you arrived at that.
Looking at the adjoining properties and how they circulate and what our circulation needs were, and typically you'll have your driveways are offset from your property lines 10 feet, a typical minimum in an urban type environment. And that's how we situated the.
I was just wondering if there was a convention or something where you'd want the exit, if it were to take a right-hand turn, to be able to circulate the property or something like that.
That all goes into it relative to deliveries and stuff like that.
And this was also reviewed by the fire department to make sure that the trucks could come in, and there were some revisions that were made to the plans to deal with the trucks being able to circulate around the building. So they looked at both ingress and egress.
Oh, one more question. And in the tabulated data in the appendix here, are these case study hotels, all these X's?
You're looking at the IT trip generation sheets?
Yeah, the trip generation sheet. Is that like a? I mean, clearly we don't have. There aren't many.
Yes, those are data
size
points.
here,
Yeah, those are data points, and you can see that if you look at the top, there were 6 studies done in
So
the
is
average
that like
number.
from a traffic engineering handbook type of thing?
Yes. I believe it's a triple manual now. It's data.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Martland, at this point, I'd like to take a short recess.
Certainly.
We'll be back in 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay.